Welcome everybody. In this video I try to make some predictions. These are personal observations, my own opinion, so don't trade on this. However, if it turns out how I'm saying, then this might be a catalyst to Chinese stocks in general. But first of all, let's talk about this comic here, which I generated with ChatGPT, and it's basically summing up the situation that the Central Bank of China is telling its people go out and spend because they have lots of savings and are currently reluctant to buy as they have in the past. But the response by the consumer is actually, well, you go first. So what does it have to do with an upcoming event this month? Well, we got the third plenum, which is traditionally a session by the Communist Party in China, which is focused very much on economic policy. It will be mostly about long term, but I think this time there might be some surprises for investors, and I want to explain why. So let's dive into a little bit of context. I think if you remember on this channel, when 2023 the reopening happened in China, and by the way I also went to China several times since then, and I witnessed myself the different stages that China went through, from opening up, still very cautious on going out, even to restaurants. People were still wearing masks, to my second trip later, when people were much more outgoing, spending like crazy in restaurants and so on, and traveling domestically, and then a little bit also of some soft demand in between in some certain sectors on my later trips. And that kind of summarized also what stocks have done, because they have really anticipated a big run-up in Chinese consumption in 2023, and we saw that in Chinese stocks. They have gained some traction, but then sold off consecutively and really never got back to these levels. And you could see visually the disappointment by mainly Western observers about expected stimulus, pent-up demand, and the revival of the Chinese consumer. So that's where we've been, and I mentioned several times during that time that I'm not expecting China to go out and do the bazooka in terms of stimulus, while many pundits out there and Western commentators said, well, yeah, we got to see Beijing, they will ramp up stimulus like we've seen in the West, maybe with some free consumption coupons, with printing money, who knows. But I think the Chinese, there are, first of all, not thinking that the state of the economy is as dire as we've seen in the media, mainly talking about real estate, deflationary movements and stuff like that. I think the Chinese are more observant and more long-term focused. And so the third plenum now, which by the way has been delayed, so quite unusual. I think that's also some of the concern for investors before, because usually you get this plenum and you get some, forward guidance on some very important policy measures. And this time we haven't had it for a very long time, but now finally it's going to take place between the 15th and 18th July, if I'm well informed. And I think this time my expectation, my personal expectation, and I'm not saying this is something that I know for sure, so please don't trade on that information or something. I think this time it could be different. I think we might see some stimulus this time. And why I'm saying this has something to do again with this comic, this little ChatGPT image that I generated here, because it is actually the situation that the Chinese consumer are sitting on pretty high savings, and they're not going out and spending. And so it's sort of a confidence crisis currently that I think the government wants to break somehow, and I need to get started somewhere. So I don't think we're going to see any bailouts like sometimes we see in the capitalistic West, they're bailing out private companies like the real estate developers and so on. I still think they will just do that in case that there are real big failures, and that it could potentially become systemic. I'm not going to go there and say that's the type of stimulus and bazooka that we're going to see. Instead, I think they will still focus on the main long-term issues that will be the new productive forces, how they call it, the transition to smart manufacturing, ramping up a more sustainable high-end consumption, and getting high tech into all of their industry sectors. I think has been a pronounced goal. Also shifting away from real estate. That's what we've seen. It's unfortunately, a difficult thing, as real estate is like a big part of the Chinese economy. But so far, we also have to admit they had 5% year-over-year growth in GDP and so on. And this year they are aiming for the same. And it's, of course, given the high base of their economy value and so on, and the difficulties that they're facing, it's quite difficult, obviously, to reach such goals. And I think that's one of the reasons why they might be forced, or seemingly forced, or they think this time it might be necessary to launch something, as opposed to the last time where they have been, in 2023, 2024, where they didn't do a lot. So the vicious circle that I might want to break, plus some core issues, for example, unemployment, which undermines legitimacy of the party, becoming a bit too nerve-wracking in their point of views. I think this is what might trigger them to do something. And I think they will be waiting for some stuff. So this time at the third planning, we might see some short-term announcements, and there might be some sort of a stimulus that we wouldn't see in the West, like consumption, free consumption vouchers, or printing money, not that sort of thing, but very targeted and big enough for real estate or the consumption sector. Something like this I'm personally expecting, but I think they will also wait a little bit longer for the real stimulus, for a second stimulus, after two events. Number one, the Fed has started cutting rates, and number two, there will be the US elections. I think they're keeping some sort of liquidity, some powder dry for another event. And I'm not going to spend it in just once, but I think this time with the third plenum, we're going to see the start of it. And then by the end of the year, going into next year, I think we will get a second tranche, and that might be even bigger than what they will be announcing over the summer. While the whole meeting will still be more about the long-term thing, definitely, I think this time we might see some short-term stuff, for example, in the real estate area, and maybe a surprise to investors. I think also maybe targeting the financial markets. The general views currently is like that the Chinese government doesn't care about the state of the markets and so on. I don't think so. I think they're doing this, they want to develop it, and over time and strategically, but also regulate it in a way that it doesn't become too much laissez-faire, and because it's currently still very, very volatile. But I think we might see a surprise that there will be announcing something targeted at the stock market that will catch investors by surprise. That's just my feeling. That's my guessing. Those two things, something to break the vicious circle for consumers starting to go out and spend some of their money, maybe put them a bottom into the real estate prices, and second, maybe a surprise towards the financial markets. And then all embedded in this overall picture of, look guys, we need to get away from real estate as the main way of people getting rich, of savings and so on, but instead we need to become self-reliant, we need to become tech leaders in the world, we need to switch to, let's say, sustainable energy and all of that is connected to it, Industry 4.0, robotics, you name it, all of that stuff will be in the plans for the long term, and where they will allocate lots of money. And I'm saying this time it could be a surprise because I think most commentators out there don't expect much from this meeting and from the third plenum and in sort of stimulus this time. For example, here Jörg Wuttke, former president of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China, saying, no, this is the first third plenum that has not triggered any great expectations, which probably means that the market will hardly be disappointed if not much comes out of the session. So again, I'm taking a little bit of a different views on that. That's my guess for now. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave a like and share it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And then I wish you a good start to the next week.